Now, I told you guys I had something that I wanted to read for you. Um, it's uh, it's from this it's from Humans of New York, right? It's a Facebook group that my wife belonged to, where this guy basically interviews different people from New York, and he had a very, very powerful and moving story that I have to read for you guys concerning someone who he interviewed, and it does also involves a policeman. So this is why I'm like, I'm going to read this to you guys. I don't want to try to remember it off my head and miss anything, because it's very important that you get the full context of what I'm about to read to you, because it does tie into what I was saying in terms of there are a lot of good cops out there, and it's really the bad ones that overshadow them, because when the bad ones do something, the whole world knows about it. You know, it's played ad nauseum everywhere, as it should be, because we should hold them their feet to the fire. But when the good ones do something, you really don't find out about it. So anyway, let me read this to you, right? It's from Humans of New York. I'm gonna leave a link to the original Facebook post in the description box. But anyway, it's dated June 23rd, right? And here it goes. I was a single mother of two boys. I was working overnights to make ends meet, and I didn't even have permanent residency. So things were very stressful. Every night I dropped my boys off with a babysitter on the way to work. On that particular evening, everything seemed normal. Elijah was perfectly healthy, but in the middle of the night, I received a text from the babysitter. She said there was an emergency and she was taking Elijah to the hospital. By the time I arrived, his heart had stopped beating. He was only 6 months old. The cause of his death was listed as sudden infant death syndrome. A few days later, I collected the autopsy results from the police station, and I met the lieutenant who had done CPR on Elijah. He seemed very moved by Elijah's death, but I didn't think much of it. I was too overwhelmed by my own grief. I felt completely alone. Elijah's father hadn't attended the funeral, and there wasn't even a headstone on the grave. The only thing I could afford was a small wooden cross. So whenever I visited the cemetery, I couldn't even find where he was buried. It was like I lost him completely. For years, I felt so guilty about it. It was such a weight on my shoulder. I felt that I was neglecting his memory and that I would need to make things right if I was ever going to heal. Then one afternoon, I received a call from a local reporter. He asked me if I was the mother of Elijah, and he told me that he was working on a story. The same officer, he was working on a story about a police officer who was raising money to buy a headstone. It was Lieutenant Jim Jansel, the same officer who given Elijah CPR. The reporter arranged for us to meet at Elijah's grave. Jim comforted me. He told me that all these years he thought I moved away, but he never stopped thinking about Elijah. He kept visiting his grave every Christmas, every birthday, and every anniversary of his death. In that moment, I broke down. The weight of the world was lifted off my shoulder. For the past 4 years, I've been crying to God. I was convinced that Elijah had been abandoned. Entire time, all those years, I thought he was lost and forgotten. There had been an angel watching over him. Now, I'm going to show you a picture of the police officer and the woman in question. Now, as you can see from that picture, the officer is white and the lady is black. This lady pretty much couldn't afford a headstone for her child. She thought she had abandoned her child because she couldn't even find the grave. This officer, right, who tried to save that infant child's life, right, went out of his way to not only raise money to make sure that the infant had a proper headstone, but also visited the grave every chance he got. And therefore, like alleviating the mother's guilt of not being able to find the grave in the first place. This is a white cop, and that's a black mother. So when we push through this narrative as if all cops are racist and all police are corrupt, we have to keep in mind that that's just not the truth. You know, those particular officers, that prick who kneeled on the neck for 8 minutes, he's corrupt. He's terrible. He's indifferent to human right, to human life. You know, him. The guy who shot Walter Scott in the back as he was running away and pretended that he stole his taser. He's corrupt. He's the prick, right? He's the bad guy, right? But we can't attribute that to every single cop. And again, the whole thing with the police department, yes, it does have to change, but defunding isn't the answer. No, the answer is getting rid of the blue wall of silence. And while we're at it, when we get rid of the blue wall of silence, we should also get rid of the hood wall of silence, because in the black neighborhoods, we pretty much do the same thing. You know, we keep silent. We do not report crimes. We do not report criminals. So they walk around the street with impunity to commit more crimes. We have this culture of saying that, well, if you report a crime, then you're being a snitch. Well, let me explain something to you people out there. The word snitch has been co-opted by criminals to keep you in a doldrum, to keep your neighborhoods unsafe, to keep you from doing the right thing. You know what a snitch is? A snitch is a person who perpetrated the crime with his cohorts, got caught, and then informed on his cohorts. A snitch is a person who was part of the crime and gave up his co-conspirators. That's a snitch. A person walking home from work and witnessing a crime and then calling the police to say that he witnessed the crime and give a description of everything that goes on is not a snitch. That's called being a citizen. That's called keeping your neighborhood safe. You know, it is crazy when you are given all the basic building blocks, like even the mob who use the word snitch, they've never used it for witnesses. Like you watch the mob movies, they'll say any witnesses, not any snitch, any witnesses. You know, they'll call their own, the person who took the oath to keep his mouth shut, they'll call him a snitch. They'll call him a rat. They won't call a witness a snitch or not. A witness is a witness, a snitch is a snitch. Please know the difference, because that's the difference between our neighborhoods being crappy and other people's neighborhoods being immaculate. Cooperation. So let's break down the blue wall of silence, but let's also break down the hood wall of silence. And that's it for today's A Bigger View. Take care, guys. I'll see you again. Bye.